What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Tuesday night edition of Back Your Play. BYP Rich Quinones here, joined with our guy, Jovan Alford, content producer at Sporting News. Check him out online at Jovan10. A lot of NFL to dive into, maybe sprinkle in a little NBA since all of a sudden you are on fire. But first and foremost, appreciate a couple moments, pal. How you been?
I've been good, Rich. Been good. Like you said, got a lot of NFL to talk about. I was thinking just coming into the show about all our picks and stuff from last week. And I was like, wow, we were like spot on and like very crazy how some of these games went and played out. So definitely excited to talk about that.
Yeah, and that's kind of the nature of the NFL. And, as we get to this point in the season, everyone's almost obsessed with what's going to go on with the MVP race. And look, I'm curious. I'll throw you a curveball here. You look at some of the odds, right? Burrow, Mahomes, Hurts, Allen. Mahomes is right there minus 500. I've seen as low as 450 with a Caesar Sportsbook. So it looks like he's going to win it. But let me give you a dark horse. Where would you throw Justin Jefferson in to the mix?
I've seen this become a topic of conversation as late, and I think you got to put him in that top 5 category. I mean, because what he's doing, it's almost in the same vein of what we saw Cooper Kupp doing last year. Like Cooper Kupp, what he finished with, 1,947? Right? Yeah, led the league in all, like you said, all categories, and has 16 touchdowns, which is just ridiculous. And Justin Jefferson, even though he probably won't get the Triple Crown, right, because of the touchdowns, what his impact is to that team is it's second to none, right? Especially because the way Adam Thielen kind of not saying that he's gotten worse as a player, but we're starting to see a little decline, right? And Adam Thielen that we saw a couple years ago with him and Stephon Diggs, and you're like, whoa, this guy's really good. Now Jefferson has overtaken that mantle. And when we think about MVP, right, and you think about the stats, but also just the narrative and just valuable player, right? You take Justin Jefferson off that Vikings team, they're not who they are offensively. He makes Kirk Cousins better at his job than Kirk Cousins for him in that respect.
It always goes, unless you're a defensive player that has a year where you're breaking sack records, so to speak, and you're really dominating, right? Because all of a sudden, a month ago, we were talking about Micah Parsons and maybe even the defensive player of the year. And now, to be honest, you got to look at Bosa in San Francisco. To me, right, he's the defensive player of the year because he has legitimately now been a game wrecker when he's needed to be. But I always think of, it's always the quarterback position. Here's another name. Why are we not throwing Kirk Cousins names out there? Why? Because he's got Jefferson and a running back and Thielen. I feel as though, and the funny thing is, I needed Captain Kirk to be a bad Captain Kirk against my Giants last weekend. I didn't get it, but he has quietly put together one of the best seasons of his career. I don't understand why people do not give this guy any type of love. It's ridiculous.
I think because when they see Kirk Cousins and they just see his stats, they almost see it as empty calories, right? They just see it as just like it's okay. It is what it is, right? I think that's what it is. Kirk Cousins. It's like, all right, he puts up those numbers, but what is he going to do for you in those moments when you need him the most? Like, can he step up and be that guy? Because he's put up respectable numbers. I think this season he's at 27-11. It's not bad. It's almost
all those comebacks.
Which they shouldn't be in those comebacks, but that's a whole different story about that Vikings team. But like you said, those comebacks, he's played a role in it along with his defense. So I think because his numbers aren't super gaudy, in terms of what Mahomes does in the passing game, or his arm, what a Josh Allen does, or his efficiency, which a Burrow does, because a Burrow doesn't put up the 300, 400 passing yard games a lot, but he can dot you up efficiently and have 200 passing yards and 4 touchdowns because he's efficient. And then you have Hurts, who he can kind of give you a little bit of both. He gives you the stuff through the air, but he also does amazing stuff on the ground. So I think that's where he kind of lacks in those categories, but he's solid, right? He's a respectable starting quarterback, which is hard to find in today's game.
I feel like some of the books are having a hard time to really distinguish who's going to win the MVP award, odds aside, because Hurts is out of game, maybe even Sunday against the Saints. Even if he plays, I don't know how much it hurt. You can always say, well, look, they could have beaten Dallas and they had Gardner Minshew. They just turned the ball over too much, especially late. So that shows you they can win without Jalen Hurts. So that kind of crushes an argument where if they would have went out and their offense scored 13 points, you're like, see, this is why you need Jalen Hurts. And it's kind of like a double whammy for them because they didn't win the game. But I feel as though even when you look at some of the odds as they're updating and as the next week or two starts to progress, I still think if Burrow lights up, if Burrow has, 2 more games where it's 3 to 4 touchdown passes, 350, no picks. I mean, that team's kind of rolling. Don't you also have to take in consideration a team that is kind of streaking towards the playoffs? And he single-handedly, has really kind of put Cincinnati on his shoulders. I mean, his numbers are pretty gaudy. I don't think they'll wind up like Patrick Mahomes, but I do think that you have to give him some serious consideration.
Oh, no, you definitely do, because his play is, like I said, the reason why they've been one of the best teams in the second half this season. And like you said, his numbers, I mean, he's second in passing yards with 4,260, second in touchdown passes with 34. That's only behind Mahomes in both categories. So there's a chance where he could make that late season push. Is not out of the realm of possibility. And that's no disrespect to other guys ahead of him. It just shows you, like you said, it's so hard to handicap this race just this season because it's almost like the stock market. One guy goes up, another guy goes down. And like you said, Burrow doesn't have, he threw a couple of interceptions last week's game against the Patriots. But if he plays a clean game in a primetime matchup against the Bills, against Josh Allen, another MVP contender,
there you go,
and outplays him, that's only going to help build that narrative for him to make that late season push, even if he doesn't win, but just to make that vote just tighter.
Sure, because you might take away some votes from Mahomes. And the other point is Burrow in Cincinnati's already got the better of Kansas City.
Exactly. There you go. He have that on his resume too. He outplayed him.
I don't get bent out of shape over rookies of the year, defensive players. And sometimes it's almost as though it actually helps a team, right? Because a player might really feel slighted and all of a sudden they got a chip on their shoulder and they just go on a run. I mean, I think a lot of it's subjective. It's what we're kind of looking at. You can make a case for and against 3 or 4 or 5 players that we've kind of talked about. All right. So the Eagles right now banged up Lane Johnson, Maddox, Jalen Hurts. I know they're going to have to fix the offensive line. I'm a little concerned because I think Maddox is a huge loss. Lane Johnson's obviously a huge loss. The cohesiveness on that line, Jovan, you see what the Philadelphia Eagles do record-wise when he's on the field. I mean, it's just factual, right? They're like 700 clip. Yeah. And then when he's not on the field, it's a whole different
like a 300 something clip.
Right. Yeah. I'm not going to say panic or troublesome or worry, but the injuries aside, on the field itself, what did you see Sunday that maybe is a cause for concern?
Turnovers. I think turnovers was the big thing there. The way they turned over the ball on Saturday was inexplicable. I mean, the fumbles, you just can't have those.
No.
But the Miles Sanders one, that was just, you can't have that. The Boston Scott one, I think that was the Boston Scott on handoff. Can't have that one either, but I guess you can kind of chalk that one up to just not playing together per se, that combination, but still you can have those. You can have the interceptions too. Minshew had a couple of interceptions. He could have had more interceptions if things went a certain type of way.
Sure.
So, and the turnovers kind of lingered in that game against Chicago, where Hurts had a couple of interceptions too as well. So I think the turnover bug is very concerning thing for them right now. And then defensively, I think the way they play defensively, you can't give up 40 points. I don't care who it is, especially when your backup, quarterback gets you 27 because they got the other 7 from Josh Sweat. But when your backup quarterback in your offense gives you 27, you can't go out and then give up 40 on the other end. And there was a lot of defensive breakdowns. They did a great job stopping the run, right? Elliott and Pollard didn't really do anything. But when you talk about pass defense, I think you might have seen the stat where Dak Prescott was like perfect against zone defense, like 24-24, something like that against zone defense. And then against man, he had issues.
Yeah.
And part of the reason why the Eagles had to go to zone, and you mentioned it, no Avonte Maddox, it left Josiah Scott out there, and this has been a common thing Eagles fans have noticed, just watching this team when Josiah Scott's in. The other team had the clear advantage when he's in the slot, and we saw the Cowboys take advantage of that. And if they hopefully they get back CJ Gardner-Johnson, because if you get him back, maybe you do something where you mess around, put him in the slot since he has the ability to do that, and maybe put Reed Blankenship, continue to have him over the top because he's played well. But that's concerning. Defense is very concerning because this has been a thing where Eagles fans kind of harped on. Like, even though the stats look good, there have been games where they haven't looked like the top tier defense. And if the defensive line isn't getting pressure, which kind of hurt them, they're not getting pressured, and it could be a long day for that back seven.
Yeah. Hey, look, I don't care if you run for 250 yards and you throw for 300 against my defense. Do that 20-20.
Yes.
I don't want you in, yeah, it's going to bother me, of course. But my point is, as long as you're not getting in the end zone, man.
That's
you know what I'm
key.
saying? Like,
that's the
especially
key.
Come playoff time, you're seeing teams that are going to be able to run the football, protect a quarterback, and then a little balance of attack with some of the defense. Dallas is laying 10 right now on the road against a, kind of a business decision squad right now in Tennessee, right? Guys starting to just check out mentally. You don't know what's going on with the quarterback. You got Henry. I think Grable, believe it or not, I think he's a little bit on the hot seat, but let's just say Dallas trips up and they lose that game. Does that make Sirianni's decision that much more easier to say whether he's going to start Jalen Hurts or not? Or you're still thinking, hey, want to win the division, get home field advantage. If he's healthy, cleared. If it's just a pain tolerance issue, he's going to go.
I think you have to play it that way because you don't want to go into a situation where you lose on Sunday and then it's like game 18, week 18 is now a Giants team who's fighting for their playoff lives against the Eagles team that's trying to stay out of getting that first round bye, because now with the injuries that you have, it's kind of imperative that you do get that bye to give these guys extra time to rest.
No doubt.
So I think for them, you got to play it as if Hurts, and this is the key, right? If he can practice at least a couple times this week. If he can practice a couple times a week, and like you said, there's really no more structure, like there's no structural damage he can do to that shoulder, then you do it. But again, it wouldn't be crazy to go with Minshew because he didn't look horrible.
Right.
If the defense just shows up, right? If the defense shows up, you can feel confident saying, all right, maybe we can roll out Minshew. But then you go into a situation where, say, if they do win on Sunday, do you play Hurts in a week 18 game that's not meaningful?
Not the rust
for the
off.
Eagles, right? And then he's rusty going into the playoffs. So they put themselves in interesting spot by not winning last week.
And for me, for selfish reasons, God forbid if the Giants lose that game against the Colts on Sunday, because I don't want the Giants to have to rely on beating the Eagles.
They should not lose that game. They should not lose that game.
Well, hey, listen, I've watched enough of them my whole life to know that, yeah, you say it now. I mean, I remember Todd Collins in a windy game years ago put up 21. I mean, I've seen this. I've seen this before, but you're right. If you can't beat the Colts at home, you don't deserve to go to the playoffs. That's as simple as that. It's funny because that line right now for the Saints game and the Eagles, it was at 6.5. Now it's 7. I mean, look, even if Minshew goes, I mean, we're relying on the water pistol here on Sunday. If you're a Saints fan, Andy Dalton's not going to muster up any type of offense.
No, and that's been the biggest thing, right? Like that Saints team just looks bad, right? I think part of that's head coaching with Dennis Allen. The fact that Alvin Kamara has not been getting touches on third down. I think Kamara spoke about this week about his frustration about it. It just shows Dennis Allen as a head coach is not good. We've seen them just be super heavy with the Taysom Hill packages, which is, again, it's a gimmick. It doesn't help the offense. It just doesn't look good. And then Jameis not playing, even though Jameis said, I don't know how I can lose my job because of injuries. It's just a bad situation there.
It is.
In a team that still has a shot to make the playoffs because their division is horrible.
Horrible. They haven't scored more than 20 points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. twice in 7 games. They scored 21 against Atlanta. They scored 27. I don't know how they beat the Rams. That's another team. I mean, what we saw with the Rams, they took out their
Well,
frustration.
they had backups. They had backups in that Rams game. I think what it was.
Yeah,
Bryce
that's
Perkins,
true. You're absolutely right. That's
Stafford
true.
got knocked out.
Yep, you're absolutely right. And that team is just, as a defending Super Bowl champ, I can't recall a team that's gone out with such a whimper like the Rams. And I wanted to bring this up because I mentioned it, and I don't know if it was the spot with you last week. I think that the Rams and McVay are looking at Baker Mayfield, and the reason they plucked him off the waiver wire is because they believe he can be a reclamation project, and they can try to salvage his career, knowing he's much younger than Stafford. They got everything they needed out of him, right? They made that move and sold their soul to win a Super Bowl title, and we're seeing how it's playing out right now. Do you buy into that at all?
I mean, I could see them as the reclamation project and potentially not keeping them for the future, right? For their benefit, but maybe for a team that we talked about, constantly about this Rams team that does not have draft picks.
Right.
Maybe you build him up to get some type of value back in return
for
him. Because it seems like Stafford's determined that he's not retiring and he's going
done.
He says he's going to play. We don't know, right? Obviously, we don't know that because you could say it, but getting out on the field is completely, different. So if I'm the Rams, I'm exploring moving them. But if Mayfield continues to play well, it's not a bad backup piece to have for the future.
That line,
he's still
the Giants
young.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was saying because Mayfield is still young too, so
yes,
it's not bad.
Yep. Yeah. And listen, there's going to be some quarterback needy team. I mean, we don't know what's going to go on with the Jets. We don't know what's going to go on with the Titans. We don't know what's going to go on the Texans. I'm trying to think of some other team.
The Colts.
I mean, it's crazy. What about Washington?
Yeah. I mean, we don't even know who's going to start in that game, right?
No.
We don't know if it's going to be Heineke or Wentz. And wouldn't that be something? Wentz back under center in a spot to get his team into the playoffs for the second year in a row.
Absurd. And they did not show up against that 49er squad. That Giant line was at 3 before kickoff. Now it sits at 5. I mean, I have the sneaky suspicion it's going to be a fourth quarter game and the Giants are going to get a fumble. They're going to get a sack. They're going to get a pick. I would love nothing more to sit back and have this a 26-3 game going into the fourth, 26-10. It's not happening. I actually think this game's going to be a lot closer than people think.
Really, even though the offense played much better, like I've never seen Daniel Jones play at that level before.
Yeah, here's the thing. So last night, I watched pretty much every play of that game because I wanted to kind of get my own little scouting on the Colts and see where Foles was at. And I just started to see where he was throwing the ball and the plays they were running and, the decision-making. Their offensive line was horrible. I think he got sacked 7 times. I mean, he got banged up, and I think it was almost like they were kind of mercying him a little bit by not really tossing him around like a rag doll. The Giants should be able to get to him a little bit. The problem is, and I know the Colts don't have their running back and they have a hard time running the ball. The Giants sometimes have lapses, especially on third down. Case in point, the other day, 3rd and 11, bubble screen to Jefferson. I mean, and that's because their DC is feast or famine. We're going to rush guy.
Yeah, Wink Martindale goes for broke most of the time.
Yeah, exactly, bro. So we're coming off the edge. Here you go. I'm so paranoid and worried that he gets in a little bit of a rhythm. And then what happens is they tighten up offensively. And the Colts defense is not that bad.
No.
It's not like the Giants are going to go out there and put up 25, 26. But like I said, I don't care if the game ends 6-3 and they win.
That's all that matters.
Exactly. All right, let me give you a couple games, get your thoughts on the Jets and Seattle. The Jets on the road lay into Mike White returns. Both squads are 7-8, 4:05 Fox window. Look, the Jets things kind of broke for them as well. Seattle mathematically hanging around. I mean, teams need help. The Jets are one of them. Do you like the Jets on the road in this spot?
This is tough. This is tough because even defensively, that Jets team didn't look good against that Jaguars team. And if Geno can get that running game going against them, then I think the Seahawks have a chance. So because it's different. It's different playing in Seattle. That's a whole different animal to itself. I think I'm gonna take the Seahawks here, but like you said, that spread indicates just how close it's going to be. That's going to be fourth quarter, who has the ball last with like 2 minutes left,
Yep.
making that last second drop.
Pardon me. How about Miami against New England? Miami is 8-7, New England 7-8, and the Pats are laying 2.5. Looks like no Tua.
With no Tua, I gotta lean towards the Patriots here. And that's it's only because it's just the Patriots. I trust the Patriots defense more
Mac Jones
than I do the
stinks.
dog. And that's another issue too, right? He hasn't been great. So it's like I'm not picking because of the quarterback, because like you said, Jones just isn't the guy. He isn't that guy. It's going to be that defense winning it. Matt Judon and those corners kind of making life tough for Bridgewater in that backfield.
How about the Vikings and the Packers? Packers, listen, I don't get in the playoffs and you're going to get waxed by San Francisco, whatever. It's just like, stop already. Like, there's always, you're going to, you don't want them to get in. You don't want Brady to get in the Bucks.
Yeah, I heard that this
week. Stop. The Bucks offense stinks. Look what they did against Arizona. Brady looks like he's getting ready to just pack it in. And then you got Green Bay. Why? Because they win a couple games. I mean, and to be fair, Tua most likely concussed. You look at the numbers after that hit, and he threw the 3 picks.
Significant difference.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know, man, but it is a rivalry game, and Green Bay is the more desperate team. But still, the Vikings are trying to get home field advantage as well.
Yep. For me, what's the line again? What's
3.5. I think it's going to close around 4.
Yeah, if it's 4, I would lean towards the Packers, just because that Vikings secondary is very, very, very suspect. They will give up yards. I mean, we just saw what Daniel Jones did against that Vikings defense. He had over 350 something.
Yeah, but there's no respect by the odds makers. You're talking about nobody believes in the Vikings.
No,
they think they're a fraud. They're 12-3 going on the road against a 7-8 Packers squad, and they're getting almost 4 points.
And I think they're like 11-0 and like one.
That's it. One score games.
One score games. I mean, there's a proof to it. And I think that's the line that indicates that, right? We're going to keep it close, even though, like you said, their record says we should be getting more respect in this spot. Yeah. But then it's just Rodgers, right? The bookmakers also love Rodgers. What will he do in another playoff situation against a division rival?
Yeah, it's the name and recency bias. I mean, even I did sprinkled a little bit last weekend on Carolina, because that line, I'm thinking to myself, something's not right with that line. Are we just jumping on Detroit? And then Carolina ran for almost 300, over 300, and they waxed them. So you're right. I mean, maybe that's, I don't know. Yes, it's always the Rodgers factor, I guess. And then you're saying quarterback to quarterback, who am I going to take in this situation?
And more so that Vikings pass defense, right?
That's true.
Can they hold up against, Christian Watson and, Alan Lazard, and can that running game get going? That running game gets going for the Packers with Jones and Dillon. It could give them a little bit of help.
Yeah. And we'll see how the weather is as well. All right. Last NFL, then I want to get a couple go around on the league and get some NBA plays from you. Bills and Cincinnati, red hot, Buffalo, red hot. This line is so enticing because to me, it's a pick 'em. Bills are laying 1, but this is just a throw a dart. I mean, the Bills have had their moments this year. They really have. I mean, they've had situations where you're like, all right, they're not as dominant as they were. I mean, the Miami game was a tough game. The Jet game was a tough game. The Pats game, they pulled away late to win by 14, and they're coming off a 22-point win over a bad Chicago team, which that game was somewhat competitive early until they pulled away.
Yeah. The Bills are definitely playing with fire these last 3 games, because you could have made the point that they could have even lost the Miami, because Miami played one of their better games of the season, and they were able to run the ball on them with Raheem Mostert. So I think just knowing that, and Josh Allen have been getting turnover prone in that red zone, as of late. I like the Bengals here in this spot. I think, I don't see Joe Burrow having another 2 interception performance. I think for them, it's going to be, can you protect him, right? No La'el Collins because he's down for the rest of the season. Can you protect them against that defensive line that, even though doesn't have Von Miller, they still got guys that can get to the passer. And if they can do that, then Buffalo can win if they get pressure on Burrow. But I think Burrow and them, they know the matter of the situation. They're trying to win the AFC North themselves. So I'd like the Bengals to kind of get this win.
And conversely, Allen has thrown some bad picks this year. He's starting to get into that far mesh where I'm running across, I'm running to my right. I throw across my body. I'm trying to
you start to believe in your
there.
arm. You start to believe in your arm a little bit.
Yeah. And it's like, come on, young buck, keep it simple. Again, Tuesday edition of BYP. Rich Quinones here, Jovan Alford at Jovan10 joining us, content producer, Sporting News. Give him a follow on Twitter. So Tua, I listen to all the talking heads today, man, and it's just people love to just tap dance on other people's graves. And I thought it was extremely harsh by a lot of these players to come out and say, at this point, he would scare any team off, any franchise off, and he's a liability. And I think maybe it's bad luck. He's taken a lot of hits. You can't control getting banged up like that. I get it. You really can't, maybe fix the offensive line to help him out a little more. I don't know. But I think liability is a really strong word. To me, that's almost like you're a pariah and nobody wants to touch you. So
right.
When you hear those types of words being thrown out, what's your first initial reaction? And then second, do you think that this is a situation where shut him down for the rest of the season and then really determine if his career is going to go on? He would have to determine that.
Yeah, I think number one, I don't think he's a liability, because if he was a liability, then they wouldn't have got off to the start that they did, right? This season, where they were 8-3 at one point and playing.
They won 3 in a row, then lost a couple, then one more. Yep.
So if he was such a liability, then he wouldn't have gotten that team off to a hot start to where they're even still in playoff contention. Like you said, you can't blame injuries. You can't say, oh, he's liable because of injuries, because that happens, right? It's a violent sport where injuries are going to happen. Now, granted, him getting concussions the way that he has, that's not good in the least. And then specifically when we saw last week, for him to be concussed in that game and still in that game is very disturbing. I think we saw how good Tua can be when you give him weapons. Like with any young quarterback, you give him weapons and you see him play well, right? Burrow had Higgins when he first came in. You add Jamar Chase, he takes off. Jalen Hurts had Devontae Smith last year. You add AJ Brown, he takes off. Tua had a connection with Waddle last season. You add Tyreek Hill, his game starts to get better. So I don't think he's a liability. And in terms of his health, I would lean towards shutting him down for the rest of the season, just because you can't. Yeah, you got to think about Tua the person and not Tua the player. The player is going to say, I want to be out there.
Exactly.
But the person, you have to say to the person, I understand you want to be out there, but long term, it's not the best situation for you, because how many times you've been concussed and you're gonna be coming back in a week or two?
Can't do it.
You can't do it.
It is malpractice, but it's funny because I'm listening to some of these former players who have gone on the record and said they've got their bell rung and they've got concussed and they played the next game. So what separates them? And some of these guys are defensive players. Like, what separates them and then Tua, so to speak, right? I don't know. I think we kind of pick and choose who we're going to pile on. I mean, we're all guilty of it. He did not play well. And now that it comes out, I got to walk back some of my thoughts and comments. And I'm a Tua fan. I like the kid. I think he's a gamer. I think he's got some talent. I like his story. I like the way he carries himself. But you don't want to see a guy go out there. It's like watching, Muhammad Ali late in his career. Just as a young kid, you got your whole life ahead of you, not even football. Ali was just getting just start to get that punch drunk, right? And that's never a good thing with a fighter or a boxer. And they're prideful, and football players are prideful as well. I look at it and I got hammered for saying it. I'm like, well, wait a second. Cleveland basically gives up the house for Deshaun Watson, who by all accounts doesn't really seem like he's, a guy you'd probably want to hang out with, right? Because of all the off the field problems. But he's not a liability, but a guy that gets concussed and goes about his business and puts up numbers and plays well, all of a sudden he's a liability. I get it's apples and oranges, but I just think it's, come on, man. I think people, some of the media think Tua is almost like, and again, a poor man's Tebow. Just like this, you know, freak show out there, if that makes sense.
Right.
And
Or he was so great in college, he should be able to.
there you go.
do.
And I don't subscribe to that. I don't. I think, like you said, we were talking about this kid in the MVP race midway through the season.
Yeah. He had his odds was at the lowest was at what, 12-1. So he was there. He was there in the race, and you can't discount that, right? You can't discount this Dolphins team being in playoff contention. You can't discount that either. And part of that is because of him. What a rookie head coach at that.
Yeah. All right. Before I let you get out of here, light night on the dock and on the hardwood. Yeah, I mean, I'll let you give a play or two. I got two that I'm looking at, but do you see anything that stands out?
For me, one play I do like tonight is the Thunder spread, which has been like tipping around -7, -7.5. I like the Thunder in this spot. Spurs, second night of a back-to-back. They're 2-4 against the spread in the second night of the back-to-back. They're also 5-11. They're actually 6-9 on the road, and the Thunder are 10-7 against the spread on the road. First time these two teams played, Thunder I think beat them by 8. Nice spot here for the Thunder to beat up on a Spurs team that's not good, even though they got a big win, last night against the Jazz. But I think the Thunder are the better young team with the all-star player in SGA.
What's that line right now? 7.5, 8? I think it's 7.5.
And hear you. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah. I think, you know why? Because you put your eye, you
Oh,
plug your
there we
eye.
go.
Yeah, there you go. It's like the AT&T commercial. What's the line on that? 7.5?
Yeah, 7.5.
All
I've
right.
seen 7.5, depending on the book.
I got I was looking at two. Houston against Boston. Houston, they just came off that win, right? They were 7-point dogs on the road against Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
They beat them 133-118, ended the 5-game losing streak. Boston whitewashed Milwaukee. They covered that 5.5 point on Christmas, 139-118. I'm not touching the money line here. I would leave towards Houston. Second leg of a back-to-back. Boston is going 2-3 ATS when favored by 10 or more. So I'm actually going to ride with the Rockets. And the second one, I was a little torn with that one. And the second one is Philly and Washington.
Mm-hmm.
So these two, every time they play, whether Philly goes to Washington or Washington goes on Philly, they figure out a win on the visitor's home floor. Right now, that line, I saw it drop to 5. I actually caught it at 5.5. Total's 225. You think about this. I believe Washington covered 7.5 point dog the other night. They still lost 8 out of 10. Embiid's numbers are ridiculous. Philadelphia 7-1. Their last 8 ATS. Embiid 39, 10, 4.5 assists, a couple scores. I'm leaning towards the under in this one, 225.5. And I'm actually going to take the Sixers laying the points.
Nah, I don't disagree with that. I think the way they've been playing this, just this stretch of these 8 games has just been impressive, right? And it starts with the Embiid and Harden. Those two guys kind of leading the way and leading the ship, right? Embiid and Harden, they play well on Christmas against the Knicks, completely just blow them out the water, even though the Knicks were up in that first half. Sixers just came out of nowhere. And then the previous game before that against the Clippers team, they battled hard and had 21 assists in that game. So they're starting to put it together. And this Washington team, they could be, they're okay, but there's not much outside of Porzingis, Kuzma, and Bradley Beal offensively.
Do you always, when I asked you this a while back, when teams start to go on these runs, do you start to just kind of ride them during these streaks, or are you more invested in what the line is as opposed to the streak itself, if that makes sense?
Yeah, sometimes you ride the wave. I think it's almost like how it is in baseball, right? When you see a team just start ripping off, like they win, they
I
win, they
agree
win
with
the first,
baseball. Yes.
they win the first 3 game set, and then they're going into the next set. Now they're, they won 4, they won 5. So you're like, I need to get on this like right now because they're rolling. Basketball, it's tough. I think it, like you said, it comes down to the line because sometimes, we've seen in many different situations where the team that's, rolling, they're favored by like 10 points one night, and they just so happily just have a bad night, and you get backdoored.
Horrible.
You get backdoored in like the last 2 minutes of the fourth quarter, and
Yeah.
the underdog covers, and you're
Not
just
good.
sitting there just like, I can't believe I bet on them. I should have took them on the money line, even though you shouldn't have, because you're
Yeah.
not getting nothing of value off of
Well,
that.
that was my point with the Rockets in the Boston game because the value for the money line is
Yeah, you're
capricious.
not. Yeah, you're not paying minus
No,
1,000 on, on on the
no.
Celtics. You're not
I
doing
mean,
that.
I,
You're not
I,
doing that.
I was even looking tomorrow night, UConn and Villanova. I mean, UConn's undefeated. Villanova has now ripped off 5 in a row after they lost 3 or 4. They've kind of turned the season around early on, 12 games in, but that line's 13.5. Like, I don't know. I mean, I know UConn is what top 5 thus far in college. I mean, but I look at that game, Big East rivalry. Here you go. We would never see a line like that in years past between those.
No, not at all. And I
Yeah,
think the line for that is probably because, again, Kyle Neptune first year at Nova. Like you said, they
exactly.
haven't played well this season,
Yeah,
but they've gotten better with Cam Whitmore coming back, the outstanding freshman. So yeah, you're not going to see many 13 and a 13 and a half in the
no,
Big East game.
no,
No.
no, we are not. All right. Yeah, we did well last week with some of the NBA plays. We'll see if we can kind of carry over the momentum. What do you got going on this week as far as the NFL and some NBA? And you going to start breaking down a little XFL?
Oh yeah, XFL season's coming up very soon. Cannot
Uh-oh.
cannot wait for that. I'm very excited, for XFL at this 3.0 now. We're at 3.0.
Yeah.
So definitely excited to, to see. I think the supplemental draft is on the 1st
January 1st, you
January.
tweeted it out.
Yes.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
see it.
January
I got
1st.
it right in front of me. I see it.
So January 1st. So yeah, definitely excited to, see, what the odds makers are going to be having for the lines and stuff, because you can find value in that stuff. I played and betted a lot on the USFL this summer. So there's definitely value in, picking these, money lines and spreads. So excited to see, what the XFL has in store
All right,
for us
everyone
on the
give Jovan
books.
a follow on Twitter at Jovan. Ted does a great job. We always appreciate him jumping on board BYP. We know with his picks, he always backs his play. We don't have to, we don't even, I got to stop tweeting about the Knicks. Every time I do, they lose. So I'm going to hold off on that. Hey, listen, if I don't talk to you, have a good New Year, pal. Enjoy the games,
Same,
enjoy the action tonight and this weekend. Appreciate you big time. And we'll do it again next week.
for sure.
All right, there you have it. My guy, Jovan Alford, kind enough to join me for a couple moments on this Tuesday edition of BYP. As always, we're brought to you by our good friends over at Play It Again Sports. Check them out online, playitagainsports.com/Woodbury/Deptford. Give me a follow at Rich Q on Q. We will do it again tomorrow on a Wednesday in the morning, and then of course in the afternoon. Everyone have a good night. Appreciate you tuning in to a Tuesday edition of BYP.